in the folder. So communism as a concept. In the folder for Foundations of Communism and classwork, you can get the PDFs. I suggest, however, you write down what I'm saying to get a main idea. So, Communist Manifesto, yes. Communist Manifesto is where I want you to begin. This is a book written by Karl Marx, funded by a guy named Friedrich Engels. They both consider themselves philosophers. The irony here is that Karl Marx is going to write this book, which I'm going to explain to you guys, paid for largely by this guy who's got money because his dad owns a factory. So the thesis of the book, and this is very simplified, but the thesis of this book is that history is leading to a conflict between two groups. The thesis of the book, history is leading to a conflict between two groups. And I'll talk about that in a moment. But I want you to write this down. The book is a reaction, or the ideas are a reaction to the problems of the Industrial Revolution. He's writing in the 1800s. The Industrial Revolution's kicked in. There's lots of problems. There are no social safety nets. What do I mean by social safety nets? There's no health care. There's no workers' rights or workers' compensation. So little kids working in a factory because their hands are small and they can reach the machines, they lose their hand, they simply just get fired, they're on their own, right? He did not foresee that by the late 1800s, workers get together and form unions, and laws start to change to protect workers and people. What was your question, DJ? Okay. So again, the main thesis is that the forces of history are leading towards a conflict between two groups. Like that. So, what are these two groups? We're going to use the French word bourgeoisie and proletariat. You should have seen the word bourgeoisie when studying the French Revolution. But what I noticed on the midterm is that many of you got that question wrong, which means you don't know the word bourgeoisie from the French Revolution. I would suggest these notes are on paper so you're not distracted. So, clearly, what is the bourgeoisie? And where have you first encountered that term? The French Revolution. The bourgeoisie is the word for the upper middle class, the ones with wealth. How Karl Marx means it is that it is the owners of the means of production. It is the people who own the means of production in society. The proletariat are the working class, the workers. In the French Revolution, we might have called them the sans-culottes, right? Or in English, we call them the blue-collar workers because they wear overalls to work. The proletariat. Proletariat. And the bourgeoisie. So Karl Marx is observing the forces of history. And he's saying that history is leading to a conflict between two main groups. It's a reaction to the problems of the Industrial Revolution, where people weren't taken care of, right? What he didn't understand is that eventually they will create some systems that do. And I'm going to get to this part a little bit later. I want to go back to how the Communist Manifesto kind of fits. So we're going to go backwards. This is supposed to be a bit of a review. But one of the main economic systems back in the 15 to the 1700s was something called mercantilism, right? It was this idea that there was a limited amount of wealth on the planet. Whatever nation controlled most of it would be the winner, right? So mercantilism. That had a lot to do with why nations created colonies, why there was imperialism, and it's going to lead to nationalism. So In the Middle Ages, you had a kind of commercial revolution where basic beginnings of banks and insurance formed in order for people to form bigger companies, etc. But the 15 to the 1600s is when this era was really getting started. Somewhere in there, we have another version of the commercial revolution and the beginning of industrialism. So the 1600s into the modern times. Banking also starts to really evolve. I would argue we're still in the middle or part of the Industrial Revolution because banking evolves again during the Great Depression when they figure out, oh boy, we got to have some insurance on this money before everybody goes nuts. Then again in 2000, that was like 1929. 2008, when there's all these bad loans that get bought up and then they all crash and we have a housing market crash. Had we not learned lessons during the Great Depression, this would have been just as bad. And some people are arguing we're about to enter another version of that cycle, your lifetime, okay? But here it is. The first system was mercantilism or mercantilism. That's going to give way to something we're going to call capitalism. Capital, definition of capital, is something you can invest. If Ingrando has a great idea for a company that does specialized personal workouts, that's his capital, the idea and the system. He might need a place to do it, right? So he might need a gym. So he's going to use the garage I have, my big, huge garage. We'll clear out all the stuff in it. We'll set up a workout zone. That's my capital, is my garage. Then he's going to go over and ask his friend with some money to borrow money or invest so that you can advertise this new system, right? That is capitalism. It's about competition because chances are he's not the only guy with a workout system. There's going to be a gazillion others, right? So that's capitalism, the use of something to invest to create business. Before you get too far, I want you to understand the modern West, the United States, Europe, etc., we're not entirely capitalism. We're partly socialism. We're a mixed economy. We're more capitalism than anything else. DJ, you should be writing all this down on paper. Why don't you close your iPad and pay attention? All right. So I want to delineate a couple other things. You're going to see this word, Marxism. It's going to play out in the next few months of what we study of history. Marxism, based on Karl Marx's ideas and writing, is a political philosophy. Marxism equals a political philosophy. I want you to note, I put it here in gray because it's kind of extra. I'm kind of assuming you know it, but I want you to note it. Political philosophy. Karl Marx really was making observations. He was not prescribing or writing a recipe for what was going to happen. He was basically looking at the forces of history and saying, hey, this is the pattern I'm noting. The pattern I'm noting, what was the thesis, Cullinan? What was the thesis of his book? What pattern did he notice? You should have it written on your paper. You don't need to get up and go see mine. The thesis is that history is a conflict. History is leading to a conflict between two groups. Who were the two groups? The bourgeoisie and the proletariat. Right? So, he was really just observing the forces of history, not really writing a recipe. Thank you. We're screen recording, so. So, what he thought was that history was progression from capitalism through socialism into something he called communism. So his political philosophy was that history was a progression from capitalism through socialism into communism. He saw it as an evolution. Remember, there was another important writer he was writing about evolution, Charles Darwin, right? Wrote in the 1800s about biological evolution. There's another guy, Hegel. He's a German philosopher. He was writing about history as a progression towards something. What Karl Marx was thinking was that the world was headed towards something more like a perfect ideal, a utopia. You might also recognize, it doesn't come up till more modern times, but the word dis means against or not, like dysfunction. A dystopia is a dysfunctional idea. It's supposed to be perfect, but it doesn't work. A lot of guys have read a book called The Giver. I think it's a movie now too, right? And don't worry about this guy. That was more of my own notes later. So again, to review, the Communist Manifesto was a book. It was basically explaining that there would be class conflict. The workers or the proletariat would rise up against the wealthy bourgeoisie. The wealthy bourgeoisie are the owners of the means of production.